السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الذي هدانا إلى الصراط المستقيم، والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله الطاهرين وأصحابه الكاملين، أما بعد. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واتبعوا ما تتلو الشياطين على ملك سليمان وما كفر سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون الناس السحر. وقال تعالى: لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. وقال تعالى: وكان حقا علينا نصر المؤمنين. صدق الله العظيم. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن الحسد يأكل الحسنات كما تأكل النار الحطب. Alhamdulillah, it is through the sheer honor and grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has blessed me to say a few words on a topic which Maulana Sahib said sometimes is very interesting and intriguing, especially for the young generation, especially with the calendar date tomorrow. I don't know if that was deliberately done. Inshallah, we'll mention a few things about Halloween as well throughout the program. But black magic, evil eye, and particularly its relation to mental health, which is often talked about. So I often mention a bit about that as well. Where does Islam fit into mental health? Do we believe in it? Do we not believe in it? Some people only say everything's black magic. Is that true? So with regards to these topics, you'll hear and see a lot of things out there, especially on social media. And these things aren't always correct. This is why it was approximately 3 years ago I started doing talks on this, because I realized there's a lot of ignorance. Ignorance in the sense that there was extremes on both sides. Some people, like I said, everything is black magic. And then there were other people, Muslims I'm talking about, sometimes even scholars, religious, knowledgeable people, who said, no, black magic doesn't exist in this day and age, or it only exists in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. I've heard this myself, it's not hearsay. And so, like I said, sometimes there were scholars. So we have to look at what does the Quran say about these things. And sometimes people are suffering, but then they get told, just live with it, just deal with it. And sadly it's more sisters. And they can spend their whole lives suffering. So with regards to Quran and Hadith, there are certain things which are black and white, which are established in Quran and Hadith. We'll mention that. And there are certain grey areas, and then there are things which we totally avoid, that you cannot do these things. But sometimes because of ignorance people end up doing these things, but it's actually kufr and shirk. And obviously in this field there are a lot of things which we learn from experience. So a person's experience, as long as there's some sort of foundation, fundamental in Islam, is acceptable, because like I said, not everything is mentioned in Quran and Hadith. So before we start, as an introduction, I'd just like to mention, mashallah, there's a lot of youngsters here. It's nice to see a lot of young faces, that when we talk about Islam, anything to do with Islam, whether it's about Allah, about the Prophet ﷺ, about Salah, Zakat, Hajj, fasting, a person should be well versed when you talk about these topics. And it's important that anything we say, we back it up with Quranic evidence or Hadith evidence. Nowadays, with the growing trend on social media, particularly platforms like TikTok, anybody can say what they want, and there's no reprimand, there's no reproach, you can't do anything, freedom of expression. So we see Muslims, young Muslims, male and female, often uneducated. They don't know what Surah Fatiha means, they don't know basic Arabic words, what Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar means, but they are having lengthy discussions, long debates, and sometimes the opposite person is a scholar, an imam. but because they think I've got 10,000 followers, I have the right to say this. So whether it's black magic or salah, or you're talking about the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or husbands' rights and women's rights, these are usually controversial as well. It's very important that we have knowledge of these things. I always quote a famous scholar, I will call him, even though he hadn't been through the traditional system, but mashallah, in his field he was very knowledgeable, so he was a scholar in that sense, Sheikh Ahmad Dida rahmatullah alayh. And he used to mention, do you know who the biggest enemy of Islam is? Anybody know? Go on. Shaitan. Everybody always says Shaitan. Shaitan is an enemy, a big enemy of Islam, but that's not the answer. Anybody else? Who?
Hamzad.
Hamzad. MashaAllah. I've never heard that one before, but no. Who's the biggest enemy of Islam? Nafs. Okay, might be your biggest enemy. Go on, brother wants to say something. Nafs, yeah? These are the common answers. But what Shaykh, they're not wrong. They are enemies as well. Shaitan's a big enemy. The Quran says he's an open enemy. But Shaykh Ahmad Dida rahmatullah used to say the biggest enemy of Islam is the ignorant Muslim. You wouldn't think that, would you? That a Muslim, so he's still Muslim, but he's ignorant. How can he be the enemy of Islam? Let me explain how. So his name will be Muhammad Abdullah. He'll have a beard like mine, jubba like mine. He'll look just like me and you. Or she's a sister called Fatima and Zainab. She wears the hijab, she prays salah. But then they also do actions which are contradictory to Islam. They are lying, cheating, fraud, eating haram, consuming haram, speaking haram, listening to music. So when the non-Muslim sees them, thinks Muhammad, Abdullah, Fatima and Zainab, these are representatives of Islam. So if this is what Islam is, that you don't treat your neighbor fairly, you answer back to your mom and dad, you behave rudely in the supermarket, then I don't want to be a Muslim. Can you see how deep that is? Often people don't think this, that people will look at us, every single one of us, whether you have Islamic attire or not, but just by your name, you don't have to have a beard. If your name is a Muslim name, common Muslim name, that's why I give Muhammad Abdullah, then they will look at you that he and she is Islam. Hence, Shaykh Ahmad Dida used to say they are the biggest enemies of Islam. So back to the TikTok Muslims and the Facebook debaters and the armchair critics and the keyboard warriors. They also have Muslim names. But what they are saying, the evidence they are giving, is not often Islamic. It's cultural. It's their views, my view. Which is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that before Qiyamah, everybody will be opinionated. That my opinion matters. My opinion. Which doesn't mean we don't listen to scholars and ulama. It's very important where you take your knowledge from, because your knowledge is your deen. If you're taking it from TikTok, then I'm going to call you a TikTok Muslim. If you're taking it from Facebook, these things are good. It doesn't mean I'm against TikTok and Facebook and online. They are good, but I always refer to them like alcohol. Alcohol has benefits. The Quran says alcohol has benefits, but the benefits are few. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. The harm is greater, and I will always say that about social media. That it is good, it has benefits. If you're not careful, the harms can be greater. Like we've just had half term, yeah? Where did most kids spend their time? TikTok. 30 seconds video, 1 minute videos are 16 an hour, sometimes more. So that's their education, and they'll say, Mummy, Daddy, I'm watching Islamic movies or videos, and Sheikh Fulan, Sheikh. But who are these Sheikhs? So be very careful where you take knowledge from. Ensure these are authentic scholars, and if you're not sure, ask the ulama here, your Imam sir. Moving on, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he mentioned in a hadith that a person will be tested according to his faith. Every single person will be tested. If you're Muslim, it doesn't mean your name is Muhammad Abdullah and you got a ticket to Jannah. You will be tested according to your faith. The stronger your faith, the severity of the test. Does that make sense? And I will explain the hadith and why I put this in the introduction before the actual talk. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentions that if a person is weak and frail, then he will be tested accordingly. Meaning he won't be tested that much. Because shaitan's already won him. Now who do we know from the whole of mankind is tested the most? Anybody? Muhammad ﷺ, okay, the Prophet ﷺ was tested from this ummah the most. And generally speaking, all the prophets. Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّ أَشَدَّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاء ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلْ فَالْأَمْثَلْ. The people who were tested the most were the prophets. So generally the prophets were tested the most. And I say this because often people think, even about the Prophet ﷺ, even Muslims and non-Muslims think, well, he was the Prophet of Allah. He was Habibullah. So he had it easy. He had it easy. Yeah, he didn't have to go to a job like we do and work hard and pay tax. But if you read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you'll see his tests were far greater than that. He was tested with his family, with his children. He was tested with his people. At Uhud, at Taif. And if we look at many other prophets, they were tested. Ibrahim a.s. was tested with his son, to sacrifice his son. Yusuf a.s. was tested with his brothers, his own brothers, threw him in a well to kill him. Which we'll elaborate on later because it comes in a lot with evil eye and hasad. Yunus a.s. was tested in the belly of a whale. Nuh a.s. was tested when for 950 years he was preaching, nearly 1,000 years he was preaching, and only a handful, 30, 40 people accepted. 30, 40 people, that's not even 10% of the time he gave. That requires a lot of patience. Ayub a.s. was tested with illness after illness. So we should never think that the prophets had it easy because they were the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do I mention this? It's because aside from black magic, jinn, jadoo, nazar, let's put that to the side and talk about general Muslims being tested. We are living in very difficult times. Yeah, times of austerity, poverty. People can't put food on the table. People can't put their heating on these cold winter nights. There's mothers who can't afford to wash their children's uniform. Children going to school hungry. Lunches are not provided because they can't afford it. They have an option of eating or heating. So you are living in testing times in this country, and around the world we see the ummah being tested again and again. Whether it's Syria, it's Gaza, it's Palestine, it's the Rohingya Muslims, whether it's China. So Muslims will be tested, it's part of your faith. Closer to home, sometimes it's not always about war and poverty. Sometimes it's basic things like illness, which I say basic, but somebody who's ill or going through a sickness will not appreciate me saying that's basic. It's basic for you, it's easy for you to say Maulana Sahab. Ask me what I'm going through. Illness after illness after illness. We see sometimes people who have marriage problems. They go through marriage after marriage after marriage. There are other people who maybe can't have children. There are fertility issues. There are other people who see death after death of their mother, their father, their children. That's why I gave the example of the Prophets ﷺ. Many of them went through death of their beloved ones. Many of them went through sickness and illness. Many of them were tested through their wealth and their health. But why do I mention this? It's because any society, I'm not sure of the dynamics of this society, but what I can say is, generally speaking, Muslim and non-Muslim, we love to comment. Have you heard about her? She's been married 10 years, no children. Have you heard about him? He's been divorced 3 times. Have you heard about him? Death after death in their family. Their children died when they were young because they were bad parents. Have you heard this? We hear it all the time, and very casually we play God as though we wrote taqdeer and we know about people's lives. This goes against the hadith I mentioned, that the higher your faith, the more you are tested. Sometimes these people are the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes, I will also mention this, is they don't even have a beard. They don't look very Islamic. They don't have Islamic attire. But Allah still sees something in them which He loves. The sister may not wear hijab, or she wears hijab and she doesn't wear a niqab. So people who wear a niqab look down on her. What do you know about Islam? I wear a niqab, and I've heard this dozens of times in sisters, by the way. I'm not making this up. Now when they go to gatherings like this, women who wear niqab think themselves superior. Just like the beard with the brother with a beard, probably bigger than mine, he thinks taqwa lies in the beard. Show me a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said taqwa lies in the beard. The beard is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We don't belittle it. But taqwa does not lie in the beard. The non-Muslims in the time of the Prophet ﷺ also had beards. There are non-Muslims today who have beards. But we should never look down on another person. And I'm saying this because I've seen this time and time again. I've seen brothers who are clean-shaven. You see sisters who may not wear the hijab. Their character, their akhlaq is better than the mosque goers. I say that without hesitation. I can touch the Quran and say that. Because you know, iman and taqwa lies in the heart. It lies in the heart. It doesn't matter how many books you've memorized, whether that's Bukhari or Muslim or Riyadh al-Salihin. It doesn't matter how many days you go for tabligh and jama'ah and how many Muslims you've converted. Allah reward you for that. It doesn't mean you are better. Yeah, this is arrogance. This is what Iblis got thrown out of Jannah for. Ana khayrun min. I'm not prostrating or bowing down to Adam alayhi salam. I'm made out of fire. Fire burns up. He's made out of clay. I am better than him. So remember that next time we make judgments on people. You don't know what people are going through there. Seal those lips. It's not hard, is it? And when I say seal those lips, that's also the keyboard. Because the keyboard is faster than people's lips nowadays. Everybody loves to comment. And that's why I keep saying social media can be very, very dangerous. And it could be that you're happily married with 6 children and the tables turn. You lose your children. You lose your wife. So be very careful before commenting. And that's why I'm saying it's not necessarily just about black magic, that black magic causes all these things. Generally speaking, there's a lot of people sitting here today, mashallah, who probably never suffered from evil eye and black magic, but they must have suffered a death. In the last 2.5 years, we've seen over 100,000 people die. Everybody would have lost somebody they know. And it's hard. Grief and sorrow, it's hard. It's not easy. And sometimes it can affect your faith, that you lose a child and the sister stops wearing hijab. The brother stops coming to the masjid. That's their battle. You don't need to interfere in that. They will come back to the masjid when Allah wants. The sister will wear hijab when Allah wants. Yeah, many times we read the seerah that after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, so many Sahaba left Islam. That was their battle and their struggle. So moving on, we come into this world as babies, and as we grow up, every single person wishes for an easy life, wishes for happiness. Is there anybody here, I might as well ask, nobody's really corrected me, but you can be the first. Is there anybody here that doesn't want happiness or doesn't want an easy life? Just let me know what side business you're doing and you're making those 6 figures. Everybody wants an easy life, yeah? The system we have, working 9 to 5, wife, kids, women putting up with their husbands. It's hard. Life is hard. And I always say that. There are some people who disagree with that. Sometimes they teach their children that life is easy. But there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to back that up. Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min. That the world is a prison for the believers. So if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is saying that this world, this life, temporary maybe, is a prison for the believers, and how can we think and say life is easy? It's a walk in the park, it's a piece of cake. Further the hadith says, وَجَنَّةُ الْكَافِرِ, and it's paradise, it's heaven for the non-Muslims. So the word used is sijn, prison. Now we all know about prison. Hopefully nobody's been to prison. But generally what we know, in prison, there are certain restrictions. Certain things you can do, and certain things you can't do. So why did the Prophet ﷺ compare that to this life? How does that fit into Islam? Anybody know? आप भी बोल सकते हैं या इमाम साहब ने पाबंदी रखी है. Are they not allowed to speak? Inshallah, I will ask questions just to make sure you're awake. If there's restrictions in prison, certain things you can do and you can't do, how does that fit into Islam?
Discipline.
Discipline. In Islam we have discipline. Halal and haram is the discipline. Simple. You don't need to overthink, it's a very simple answer. So that's how it's a prison. In a prison you have to be in bed at a certain time. You can only eat certain foods, you can only come out of your cell at certain times. I know the prisons in the United Kingdom are very lax, so maybe now you can go to gym and do college courses and watch movies and etc. But maybe if you go to the Middle East they won't be so lax. But even the prisons here, there are still restrictions, and in our life as Muslims there are restrictions. Yeah? And you can eat food, you just can't eat pork and bacon. You can drink, yeah? You can have fizzy drinks, you can drink juices, you can't have wine and alcohol. So when people come into this world, we all want ease and comfort and happiness, but that never happens. And this is the hadith that you need to remind yourself. That I'm in a prison, a temporary prison, we have certain freedoms, but at the same time, there's only so much we can go. And part of this, trials and tribulations will come. And for some of us, maybe sitting here, for some of the sisters, some people listening online, part of that trial and tribulation is that a person gets afflicted with the things mentioned in the topic today. Things like sihr, black magic, ayn, evil eye, and jinn possession. And sometimes when people are afflicted with these things, they can conflict with their iman, even their life. They don't want to live anymore. They don't want to live anymore. And as we know, generally in Islam, suicide is haram. Suicide is haram, but there are certain hadith which have exceptions. If a person is not mentally sane and capable, then whether you want to make a judgment or not, sometimes it's best to stay quiet on certain issues. I mention this because working in this field, we deal with many people who suffer from mental health and suicidal issues, and sadly to say that the ulama have not fully understood what mental health can do and what people who are suicidal and depressed can do. So the fatwa has always been haram, 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 suicidal. But like I said, there's a hadith that 3 types of people will not be questioned on the Day of Judgment, and one of them is someone whose capability is not 100%. It could possible that somebody ended their life but they weren't 100%. Best again, seal lips. Good policy in this day and age, seal lips. Because I've seen it in this country, and there's people I know, and the fatwa was always Jahannam, Jahannam khalidina fiha abada. Whereas I wouldn't say that about people who I know. And black magic, jinn, jadoo can cause that. There may be many people listening in tonight who will agree with me, who've been through that. So the program will be split into 3 parts. First part will be evil eye, ayn, nazar, then black magic, what we know as sihr in Arabic, jadoo, in Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati, and then the third part will be the treatment. How do we treat ourselves? Before I start, there's certain topics or certain issues which I call umbrella topics. And to me, they are more important than the topics themselves. Because like I said, you will find YouTube videos, books on these topics, what's mentioned in Quran and Hadith. What I'm going to mention now in the next 5 minutes or so, often people don't mention that, but to me, if you get this right, what's going to come after it, or if you're afflicted, inshallah, your road to recovery will be smoother and swifter. And there are basically 2 things, tawakkul and tawheed. Words which hopefully every Muslim should know, even the young ones sitting here. Tawheed means the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is a basic meaning, what you learnt in madrasa at age 4, 5 and 6. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Yeah? But then You have to live your life according to this kalima. That's the real meaning. So you pray the shahada, you're Muslim. You've entered into the fold of Islam. But that's not full stop. That doesn't guarantee you Jannah, because your actions are contrary to Islam. You could be deprived of Jannah, and you might even lose your iman. So it's very important, after saying that kalima, we know what the kalima requires. So in part of Ruqya treatment, one thing we promote a lot is that the person's belief is correct. Now some of you are sitting here and maybe you're looking at me thinking, this guy's teaching us what our kids learn in madrasa, what we learned when we were 4, 5, 6 years old. Not necessarily. As you grow up, you will go through different phases in life. And a lot of people pray salah, a lot of women wear hijab, and brothers keep the beard and roam the sunnah. But in their heart, their iman is not correct, their foundations are not correct. And in Islam, the foundation is important. Yeah, we do know that the people at the time of the Quraysh, the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they also believed in Allah. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. Sometimes when I teach the madrasa students, they always think, well, they were mushriks, so they were into idolatry. وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. If you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, the Quraysh, لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ, they would say Allah created it. So where was the problem? They believed in Allah as the big God, but they also believe in the little idols as well, as helpers. A bit like the Hindu religion. It's the same, they also believe in Allah, maybe not with the name Allah, but Ishwar or another name. So it's likewise, we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to make sure that there's no partners. And every single person thinks, what's this guy talking about? Of course we wouldn't do shirk. Shirk's the biggest sin in Islam. Shirk takes you out of the fold of Islam. I would never do shirk. It's Jahannam khalidina fiha abada. But many of us, whether it's the greater shirk or the lesser shirk, perform shirk. When it comes to medication and treatment and healing, we go to Pir Sahib or Maulana Sahib. And sometimes meeting them, greeting them, we bow down. Some do sajda.